Hi, welcome to Queen of the Ring, the podcast that wants to talk to you all about wrestling. My name is Alexa. Today I'm going to be continuing the life of Luna Vachon.
I am the woman that will strip you of your soul. And I am the woman that will strip you of your mind.
Where we left her off was as her career was just getting started and things were really beginning to pick up. And as we move forward, I want to give content warnings that still apply from last episode, but just want to repeat one more time. A content warning for abuse, drug misuse, and ending one's own life. As Luna really began to sink her claws into Trudy, there was a lot going on in her life. In August of 1991, Luna's beloved Aunt Vivian and her daughter were struck and killed by a driver in a car accident. Losing someone you love in such a tragic way could never be easy, but Luna had a very complicated relationship with her aunt that was only 11 years her senior, and Luna valued and looked up to Vivian her entire life. But friends of Luna's and partners of hers throughout her life discussed that there may have been a history of sexual abuse with her aunt when she was a child. When asked of this, her father simply stated that he did not believe it. And when people, especially children, are abused, it has a way of graying everything in one's life. I haven't talked about this very much publicly, but I have a deeper understanding, I think, of Luna's situation when it comes to CSA, child sexual abuse, because I was abused by a family member throughout my childhood and, through therapy and many other venues of type of healing, I guess. I've tried to, find a way to look at it that keeps me moving forward. So I guess I want to be upfront with everybody that when I am conjecturing about how that might have been, if this did happen, I'm just putting in the way that I view it and the way that I've looked at my life and what CSA from a family member can really do to someone. So when I say that it can gray things in your life, it really can, because when you know your abuser, like the complexity of feelings can become incredibly chaotic. It is a really hard thing to go through, and kind of putting together your opinion of them in the end is very difficult, and it's everybody's separate journey, of course. Because unfortunately, a lot of people do go through this. The wrestler Mick Foley had said that after Vivian had passed, a very well-meaning fan simply mentioned Vivian's name to Luna, and it left her uncontrollably sobbing. And, whether her father believed what happened or not, I don't think it can go unrecognized that Luna experienced a lot of abuse throughout her life. And according to some psychologists, diagnoses of mental illness can be traced back to, of course, that classic combination of nature and nurture. Yet researchers and, lay people alike understand that child sexual abuse can attribute to mental illness, Like the trauma hypothetically contributes to a susceptibility your brain may have already had there. Like it's like a freaky little fucking piece of shit locksmith that goes in there and unlocks this terrible door. But Luna struggled with her mental illness throughout her life. She had mentioned to friends once before that as a child, she was studied by Emory University when she still lived in Atlanta, so it was before the age of 4, which, if that's true, is so horrifying. Like, there's a reason that medical horror is a subgenre of scary movies, and to know at such a young age that there's something wrong with you, you're being poked and fussed over, like, examined, I think that would really add to a feeling of otherness, or at least I really feel like it would. Her first diagnoses, apparently, that her father said was bipolar disorder and depression, but later in her life, different friends of hers would kind of advance this into a schizophrenia that she possibly had, or maybe it was a few different things, which in psychology is referred to as comorbidities. So she could have had, maybe depression and maybe she had bipolar disorder that kind of made her manic, or maybe a psychosis at times. But people had different ways of describing the way that she made them feel. And I am not trying to diagnose her at all. I'm only repeating what I've read and heard from people that were close to her throughout her life. Because people like Gangrel would say that she was incredibly explosive. He would say that her mood was like the Florida weather. If you don't like it right now, wait 10 minutes. It'll change. In a good mood, Luna would often speak with this childlike voice, but if something set her off, she could darken. And her son Van described how her bipolar disorder affected everybody in the house when he was growing up and she was there. It left everyone to navigate her emotional minefields, which seems very difficult for a child. But as life does, it went on, and while moving through different wrestling promotions, Luna divorced her first husband. She began dating wrestler Dick Slater, whom his closest friends referred to as, quote, an abusive individual who took out his own frustrations and shortcomings on others, unquote. He was known as Dirty Dick Slater, and he left Luna to state in a live TV moment,
I hear they call you Filthy Richard in parts unknown, but that's another story.
And while none of her friends said that they witnessed any abuse, they did see bruises, and she confessed that he had been hitting her. After Luna ended her relationship with Dick, only smart women do, she got involved with someone from her childhood, Tom Nash. In 1991, Luna was managing a tag team, the Blackhearts, which was made up of Nash and the previously mentioned Gangrel. And during this time, Tom and Luna got married. And while Luna would continue working and being on the road, her sons stayed with their grandmother and only got to see their mom twice a year. Mad Maxine, the wrestler, describes a day when she went to Luna's house, which was a pink vintage 1950s trailer with an attached porch on the front. And Luna answered the door crying. And she said it was one of her son's birthdays, and she was just very sad not to be with him. And Mad Maxine consoled her, but she was genuinely surprised to find out that Luna had children. In the wrestling world, many people keep their home lives far removed from their work life. But I could see many different reasons why somebody would want to keep their private life private, in a circumstance like that especially. And wrestling colonized her life. It peered its way into every nook and cranny. Her family, her friends, her lovers, and even her indiscretions. Because while married to Tom, Luna's son Van reported a kind of a quick shift in their home after the marriage. Because not long after they were married, Tom would be leaving through the front door to go to work, and Van said that Gangrel would be slipping through the back door, his tag partner. The relationship between Luna and Gangrel had started a couple years before as friends, but started as enemies, really. Because while training together, Gangrel tells a story about how Luna jumped on his back and latched her teeth into him, biting him incredibly hard. After he shook her off, he was furious. But he says it because before the scabs had finally and fully healed, they had already become best friends. And that's when Gangrel's wrestling persona became the vampire warrior. He would say that Luna was really the original vampire because of her vicious first bite. And this makes me think of something that I don't know why I think is so fun, but in, mythology and stuff like that, they talk about lunacy and the connection to the moon. And, of course, there's a grammatical connection to it as lunar and lunatic, lunacy being kind of grammatically connected. But then also, they say that under a full moon, people can go mad, and they call it the lunar effect, and they also call it the Transylvania effect, which I just thought was a sweet connection for Gangrel and Luna. Sorry, I'll get back to where I am. Life was moving at warp speed, and when Luna stopped working in Florida, she took her talents outside of the United States. She toured Puerto Rico, Dubai, Australia, Singapore, Europe, and she toured Japan 17 times. And, after all of this time had passed, her family finally began to accept her dream, and her father actually worked as her manager for one of her runs in Japan. Luna was following a very classic path of becoming a wrestler, the same avenue many different wrestlers had taken for decades, making their way through the United States or Canadian territories with different small promotions. Newer wrestlers hone their skills and character in these places. And after that, they make their way out of the country, working in big wrestling hubs like Japan and Mexico and more. And after doing their time, like prison, and earning their stripes, really, a big-name promotion may come calling. And when the WWE morphed into the conglomerate that it still is, that became the big leagues. This evolution of a wrestler is essentially a proven and kind of foolproof trajectory, if you have a good personality as well. But over time, some women have been able to break this old school mold. Sex appeal and personality enable some of them to jump in the front of the line. And I don't think anybody likes getting cut in line, because for those who were left behind, it's infuriating. Women wrestlers in the industry, such as Sable, Sunny, Melina, Terry Reynolds, Deborah, and more, have been used as these kind of Trojan horses of femininity, making their way into this industry without anyone really questioning it. And although I'm sure some of these women wanted to wrestle, they weren't able to. So alas, their work as a manager or a valet pushed them into a spotlight that many thought they didn't deserve. On April 4th, 1993, Luna finally got the chance to debut with the World Wrestling Federation at WrestleMania, which is rare for someone to be able to debut at WrestleMania. The audience watched as she stalks onto the runway with her big bouffant blonde hair and a mohawk, in a studded brawn panty leather set, and silver spider webs of chains cascading down her toned body. She looks like an angel of black metal, and to many, it looked like another woman wrestler had entered a building. But in fact, they were witnessing a moment that represented the culmination of more than 15 years of hard work. Luna's evolution was portrayed through her physical presentation. She took the characters in her life and created an image that gave her power. Clothing and outward appearances create how we are viewed by others. Fashion studies are so fascinating for this exact reason. Wrestling's costuming is important because the clothes that wrestlers adorn themselves with contribute to their power not only the audience and the fans, but power over themselves. Her physical training itself was evident through her muscular structure. She worked on her body diligently, and her arms, legs, and abs were steel. Luna was always incredibly strong. For this debut, Luna appeared as a valet for the wrestler Shawn Michaels, leaving her to be his support, unfortunately. And after this debut, Luna became the first woman wrestler to be a playable character in a WWF video game. It was WWF Raw, and that allowed her children to buy a whole new game console so they could wield their mom's avatar. Post-WrestleMania, Luna was paired with Bam Bam Bigelow as his valet, but she rarely got a chance to wrestle because the women's division was minimal at best. Fans and women wrestlers alike were incensed by it. Deborah Ann Michelli, also known as Alundra Blaze or Medusa, explained that there were only 6 women on the roster at one point. She said, quote, "There was no women's division in the Federation. It was a men's committee. Just men sitting around a table, circle jerking, not knowing what to do with women." The WWF never gave Luna the women's championship, even though they planned to. She was penalized for smoking in front of fans, and her sentence that time was losing the opportunity to win a title. And after something like that happened again, Medusa was infuriated. And once on a tour in Canada, Medusa approached Luna, and she was lamenting at how ridiculous it was that in Luna's own home country, she couldn't even win the belt for one night. Medusa, who was the women's champion at the time, thought that it was cruel, and she told Luna she was going to drop her the belt with or without the WWF's permission, and they wanted to stage a coup, because Medusa was just going to give the championship belt to her. Their mutiny did not work, because when Luna repeatedly pinned Medusa, the referee refused to count to 3. In 1994, Luna and Gangrel's secret became known as the two decided to get married. After fighting in a steel cage match on Halloween, Gangrel came back to him and Luna's house, where their friends gathered in costumes, and they were married at midnight. The bride and groom exchanged tattoos of vampire bites on their necks in lieu of wedding rings. An article announcing their marriage was titled, "Was it love at first fight?" And what they didn't know it then is that it was actually love at first bite. Unfortunately, though, being in the biggest wrestling promotion in the country didn't keep drugs at bay for Luna or the people she was close with. The casualness around drug and steroid use was quite prevalent at the WWE around this time, just as it was in Florida. Around this time, Luna became incredibly close with wrestler Sherry Martel, and she was known as the sensational Sherry and was also a legendary heel herself. They were both using and taking a lot of pills and smoking a lot of weed at this time, and they had a very short-lived feud that ended very abruptly when Sherry was released from the WWF for possible drug misuse. But even wrestlers who came in the business after Luna, such as Rob Van Dam, revealed years later that some wrestlers would, quote-unquote, H-bomb each other as a joke. And to H-bomb someone means slipping Halcyon into their drink, which is a, comatose, it's like roofing somebody. And they would abandon them to this comatose-like sleep. And in the early 90s, after I would say probably years of rampant drug and steroid use, Vince McMahon Jr. and the WWF were investigated for what would become known as the steroid trials. Luna claimed that when all that dust was kicked up, Vince started really cracking down on drug use. The WWF decided that they were going to send her to rehab, and when she got there, she said that she immediately received a fax that she was fired. After she was released from rehab and sober, Luna got another work opportunity. In 1995, she debuted at Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, and she was recommended by her once coworker and friend, Nancy Sullivan. Luna quickly made history there, because she was the first woman to win an intergender cage match against Stevie Richard. The match was incredibly brutal and bloody, with Luna beating the ever-loving shit out of her male opponent. And in that moment, it was just so clear how powerful Luna was. She had come from a place that held her back and made her smaller, and arriving in this new environment where she flourished was probably nice for fans to see, and they saw that change and they cheered. And all of this work, and probably more, inspired the WWF to hire her back, so she re-debuted 2 years later in 1997. But whether or not the cage match actually had anything to do with was part of her rehiring, like she wouldn't have known, because yet again, she was made the valet of another arbiter of bizarreness, Goldust, who is Dustin Rhodes, the son of Dusty Rhodes. Clad in a black and gold bodysuit and matching makeup, Dustin Rhodes' character was villainously queer. And with Luna by his side, they made the most intense genderfuckery wrestling attraction. And their costumes would sometimes feature dominatrix garb, where she's, walking him like a dog, or he's wearing baby New Year's diapers. And it's just the craziest stuff that they would do. And in a storyline that unfortunately represented the way the WWF valued women's wrestling in 1998, Luna was placed opposite Sable, another valet. Sable's role in the company won her the cover of Playboy, and it made her incredibly famous. She was presented to fans as this package of jaw-droppingly stunning woman who was that. She was beautiful. Sable's then husband brought her into the wrestling world, where they created a character that was antithetical to Luna's. In opposition to Luna's dense in-ring power, the WWF was praising a hollow version of femininity. And what made it worse is that they weren't celebrating women who were wrestlers. They were celebrating beautiful women for being beautiful, which I have nothing wrong with, of course, but in this case, I think we should be celebrating the wrestlers. And all of this would become painfully clear to Luna in the coming months. After Goldust teamed up with Sable's husband, Mark Miro, their valets on the outside of the ring, Luna and Sable, got into a spat. This led to a mixed tag match for WrestleMania 14. I'm sorry, I'm very bad at Roman numerals. I believe it's 14 between the four of them. Sable and Mark won, and this allowed Luna and Sable's feud to escalate, and it would be culminating in a singles match that same year. Leading up to their contest, the division between Luna and Sable was only intensified when WWF bosses approached Luna and basically told her that she could lose her job if she hurt Sable in this coming match of theirs. And of course the objective in wrestling is to keep people safe. You don't want to hurt anybody, but in wrestling it is inevitable that someone might get hurt. And they threatened Luna because Sable had her big Playboy shoot coming up, and this put Luna in an impossible position, because to wrestle someone with little to no training, which she had no training, it's not only dangerous, but it's exhausting, and this put the onus on Luna and Luna only. She not only had to protect herself, protect Sable, but she also had to make Sable look good and make it convincing enough so that the audience would believe it was plausible that Sable could beat her, which it's not. Luna did her job. They gave Sable the win and the WWF Women's Championship. When they were all walking backstage, through the curtain, Luna reported to friends that she saw Vince McMahon and other writers, higher-ups in the company, clapping and holding flowers for the finishing of this match between the two of them. She was warmed for a moment, but she quickly realized that these accolades were intended for Sable. She rushed into the back, but people could see she was upset. Some tried to console her, including the valet Sunny, who honestly looks like she could be Sable's sister. And when she started to console Luna, in response, Luna picked her up, stuffed her into a production box, and began to beat the shit out of her, only hitting Sunny's body the whole time because she knew a shot to her face would result in her being fired. I think she took her anger out on someone who was really just trying to help, but was perhaps not the right messenger. And Mick Foley said about that night that, quote, Luna wanted to be acknowledged as something other than strange. Which I think we all do. Don't we want to be for the things that we're good at? It should be noted that although Sable's beauty was celebrated and commodified, her role in the company didn't last. After being released, Sable filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the company, citing unsafe working conditions and sexual harassment. Even the women who were exalted were still not being respected nor ethically treated. And this just prolonged and intensified very hostile working conditions and a very hostile working environment, I can imagine. In 2000, for the WWF pay-per-view, The Royal Rumble, the writers developed a typical segment for the women fighters in their company, a bikini contest, of course. Some of the writers and producers approached Luna beforehand. They asked her if she would mind, if she was down, if she consents, if she would take off her bra and expose her breasts in the segment. Apparently, she stood up to Vince in front of a large crowd of people and retorted, quote, "You've been trying to make me ugly all these years, and now you want me to show you my tits?" Luna's whole career was like that of a final girl in a horror movie. Life's calamities piled up while her superiors and her peers labeled her a black sheep and solely celebrated a robotically sexy female form, like almost Stepford Wives of the Squared Circle. On a positive note, the fans did know this, and despite everything, her subjugation made them love her more. And that subjugation making them love her would be actionized in 2015 when fans who were exhausted by the treatment of the women on the roster started a campaign, #GiveDivas a Chance. The change in our media landscape has made fans' voices louder, and I wish that Luna had had that chance for somebody to stand up for her. In an interview with On the Mat about the Divas division of the aughts, Luna said, quote, "There are some beautiful women wrestlers out there, but there's also girls that are maybe not so beautiful, but they're not getting the opportunity to get into the squared circle because their weight or their beauty is holding them back. And this is the sport of kings and gentlemen. This isn't the sport of bimbos and boob jobs." And her words were honestly never more true. Many women are held back despite their talent because they're not marketably attractive in this grossly specific way the WWE requires. And I took marketably attractive from You're Wrong About, the podcast. Sarah Marshall, when talking about conventionally, quote-unquote, attractive people, said that she really thinks when people say that, they mean marketably attractive, and I couldn't agree more. Sorry, I'll get back to the facts, but I think it can be argued that there is a place in wrestling for bimbos and boob jobs. Because, in fact, I think that there's a place everywhere for bimbos and boob jobs. I don't think the problem lies with a woman's ability to use any opportunities that come her way. It lies with the men in positions of power who dole out said opportunities. Luna was placed against women who were labeled as eye candy, and it was very, very clear who the organizations valued more. Luna had reason to be angry because she didn't perform the quote-unquote right type of femininity, so she was held back. It was easy to see why she took her anger out on women like Sable and Sunny, who were performing the right type of femininity. In a later interview talking about the women who didn't get equal opportunity, Luna uses an example of Natalya Neidhart, saying that Natty is better than many of the men on the roster, but especially in the beginning of her career, did not get enough opportunities. Natalya is still one of the best wrestlers in the WWE roster today, and Luna's connection to her makes sense. Because Natty is also a legacy wrestler. Her father was Jim the Anvil Neidhart, half of a tag team with his brother-in-law, Bret Hart. Unfortunately, Luna and Natty's stories intertwine even further because Luna's suspicions were quite clearly confirmed on the women's wrestling reality television show Total Divas. Total Divas is the best show ever, by the way. I love it so much. I think it's incredible. But on the first episode, Natty talks to the audience, and she tells the viewers how her legacy has not helped in the way that some would think. As the other girls are already referring to Natty as a veteran, Natty tells the audience that she was in independent wrestling promotions all over the United States, Canada, Japan, Mexico, and more before being in the WWE. And when on the show, she's approached by higher-ups, and on camera, she's told that she is not going to be having a WrestleMania match that year because it will be given to the Bella Twins, who Natty emphasizes she taught to wrestle. And in a moment where she's watching the other women wrestlers walk a red carpet that she had to merely work at, Natty discloses that she feels like she's on the outside looking in. And this is all eerily paralleled to Luna's experience and shockingly accurate to how Luna described Natalya 6 years earlier. And when it came to who Luna admired whilst in the company, she had a brief feud with Jacqueline Moore, who had a very similar entrance into wrestling as her, and Luna and Jacqueline would look back on their work together fondly. Their individual professionalism made them both shine, and even though many of their matches were only 5 minutes long. Getting back on our original timeline, there were still a couple more backstage incidents, like that of stuffing Sunny into a box that Luna had done, and she was again released from the WWF. After her firing, she went back to the home that she and Gangrel shared, and she was more than fuming. She was steaming. He watched as Luna dumped all of the cocaine she had onto his surface, started scraping it into thin lines that in the end read, "Fuck you, Vince," which I think is really funny, actually. At this time, though, Gangrel said that a typical night was not very funny. It could be a few 8 balls, several hits of ecstasy, and Luna was a never-ending loop of just drug-fueled chaos, basically. In a short movie, In the Ring with Luna Vachon, a documentary crew followed Luna to train a group of young wrestlers. The crew claims that it was filmed on June 6th, 2006. Sorry, in a gym behind a mental asylum, which is, I love, why not? And as the training is going on, she's giving these rookies incredibly sage advice. She says that wrestlers are the least paid entertainers and athletes in the world. She continues in saying if it was up to her, wrestlers would be handed a Screen Actors Guild card after their first 5 minutes of live television. I could not agree more. Wrestlers deserve labor rights, and this designation would provide protection for the rest of not only their careers, but their lives. They would receive a pension, health insurance. It would create some level of comfort in exchange for the work that they do and the entertainment that they provide. People deserve to be able to survive in their chosen field, and wrestlers throughout the last multiple decades have tried to advocate for unions over and over and over again, and it's never worked, but it's about time it comes to fruition. They deserve to be able to survive and live. Unfortunately, though, Luna's drug use continued throughout her whole life, and she and Gangrel's marriage wasn't surviving it. It forced him to leave her, and he moved to California and ultimately got married again. Gangrel said that he stayed with Luna so long because he was worried that no one could take care of her the way he could. And in an interview, he apologizes for leaving her, but acknowledges that he had to try to save himself. They kept in contact, though, and they would speak occasionally. And as he moved on, Luna was losing grasp of herself. Some friends reported that she showed up to their house waving a gun, which is incredibly scary. After Luna's wrestling career became completely untenable, she began driving a tow truck. Since there's no protections for wrestlers, as I said, many are forced to find other work opportunities. Like so many others, Luna's body could not keep up with the career. She retired officially in December of 2007, saying, quote, "I have so many problems with my neck and back that surgery would be useless." It's kind of like what Mick Foley says when people ask him what hurts. He says, "What hurts the most?" Because not only was Luna's body affected by its afflictions, her Mad Dog-inspired voice left her with shredded vocal cords. Once while getting onto a plane after she growled something aloud, a man approached her and he told her he was a doctor and he could tell that her vocal cords were completely ripped. He told her he specialized in a repairment surgery and he could possibly help her. And while she didn't seek out that surgery, she instead grieved for her missed opportunity of being taught how to project her voice correctly and possibly preventing the injury in the first place. In an interview, she said, quote, "Dare to be different. Dare to have the balls to do the gimmick that I do and rip my vocal cords." Mick Foley had a different way to describe her voice, though. He said, quote, "Anyone who knew Luna knew that her voice could contain so much tenderness and sensitivity, and too often sadness." In 2009, Luna received an award from the Cauliflower Alley Club. She became misty-eyed and later said, quote, "I was crying when I received the award just because my father and uncle were present." For a woman that deserved so many more accolades, this was a heartwarming moment. Interestingly, that same year, wrestler Jean Antone was given an award as well. She was well known for her intergender matches, just like Luna, and her tag partner in mixed tag matches was the one and only Terry Funk. Sadly, this same year, a tragic fire burned down Luna's house, destroying almost all of her belongings. After being tossed aside by major wrestling companies, many wrestlers cannot maintain the money, fame, or credit that they once did. The memorabilia of their character not only serves as a memento of the past, but it also provides a way to make money if they fall on hard times. Luna lost it all. In one blaze, her career was ripped away from her one last time. Mick Foley knew what these items meant, and he started tweeting to fans, asking them to send their Luna merchandise to her so she could have some of its value back. And to this day, it's incredibly hard to find authentic Luna memorabilia. And without a place to go, Luna was forced to move in with her mother. Luna passed away on August 27th, 2010. Her mother discovered her body in her house, and TMZ, the predators of human tragedy, reported immediately after her death that drugs were found in the home. The medical examiner concluded she passed from a combination of benzodiazepines and oxycodone. There is a tendency in wrestling to blame steroids right off the bat when wrestlers die, and this is likely because it's easier to point fingers at steroids than at chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, or drug misuse. CTE damns the industry, and drugs damn the person. Still, in Paul Vachon's book, he alleges fault on Vince McMahon Jr. for enabling a culture of steroids. He says, quite literally, quote, "I believe that Jr. encouraged his athletes to use steroids." Although the news was circulating in the media, Luna's mother was the one to tell Luna's children. Van, now a chef who appeared on the cooking competition show Hell's Kitchen, laments that Luna was never able to meet her grandchild. He wishes that she could have, but he thinks that she didn't think she was good enough to. Luna's ashes were scattered on the Andre the Giant's land in North Carolina. Hers and his are the only remains on the property. Luna's father also claims that Vince McMahon paid for those funeral expenses. Luna was much too briefly mentioned in the 2019 WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. It was a legacy induction, and she was only awarded 45 seconds of time. It wasn't enough for a member of wrestling royalty. And even if this is appropriate to officials, it is out of line when it comes to fans, and they matter the most. Many fans feel she was slighted and see the induction as lacking in sincerity. Many articles listing the women who have been inducted don't even include her, and Luna deserves an honoring all her own. In an interview with WWE.com, Luna said, quote, "Thank you for all the years. Thank you to those that knew me back then and those that remember me still today. Thanks to everyone that ever screamed at me, cheered for me, spit at me, or threw beer on me. I want to thank them for everything." Always ignored by the industry, the fans stay ever faithful. The number of people who look to Luna as inspiration is staggering and unsurprising. She knew how to make people feel something. Her mixture of ingenuity and heritage resulted in a beautiful, fascinating, and spine-chilling legacy for the women of wrestling. And I feel blessed to live in the same time as her. Whew. And that's where we conclude our story. I just love Luna so much. I think that she is such an incredible wrestler, such an incredible storyteller, and I just respect the fucking shit out of her. I hope that everyone's doing okay and that life is moving as smoothly as possible amongst all of these glaciers in the ocean, like we're the Titanic or something. But I just want to say thank you so much. Queen of the Ring is written by me, Alexa Pruitt, and the music is by Kreider Dane of Helter Skelter Music Productions. If you like what you hear, please join us again. And if you happen to be a fan of the show or any of the episodes, if you wouldn't mind and you feel like it and you want to leave something nice, maybe leave a little rate or review on the podcast. My mother always said, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. So maybe just nice people, please. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Say what you want, but I thought that maybe I'd ask. But okay, that's all. Thank you guys. Bye.